What's up, everybody? Welcome to the View from Jamestown podcast edition. This is episode 26, and I am sitting down this morning with Matt Moedritzer from the SOCMA organization. Matt, good morning.
Good morning, Ben. Thanks for having me. Big fan of the show.
Absolutely. Appreciate it. Nice to have you here this morning. I guess kicking things right off, do you want to just do a little maybe intro on SOCMA for anybody who's not familiar with it, and then maybe a little personal background on yourself and your background and what you do at SOCMA as well?
Sure. And thanks again, Ben, and thank you for your continued support of SOCMA. So SOCMA is the only U.S.-based trade association solely dedicated to the specialty and fine chemical industry. So SOCMA members, as you know, play an indispensable role in the global chemical supply chain, providing specialty chemicals to companies in a range of different markets, everything from aerospace and electronics to pharmaceuticals and agriculture. So actually, since 1921, we've represented this diverse membership of small and medium-sized enterprises and also large chemical companies. So members are located around the world, majority being domestic, encompass many segments of the industry, producing intermediates, specialty chemicals, and ingredients used in, again, a wide range of commercial and consumer products. So a lot of products that are essential to the life, health, and kind of societal well-being.
Sure, absolutely. And how about yourself? What do you do at SOCMA, and maybe a little background on yourself personally?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll so that's kind of high-level SOCMA, and I'll kind of go into, like, I'm in the government relations department.
Okay.
So our from a GR standpoint, and I'll just kind of briefly share kind of the pillars of SOCMA, but GR is one of those. So we have trade, another EHS group that my colleague Jared manages, along with legal and value chain. So we also have an EHS&S management program with chemical operator training and certifications. That's called Chem Stewards. And then we also have a B2B program called Lead Sheets, which it's kind of like a clearinghouse for tolling manufacturers. So, and that's what specialty chemistry really is. So where commodity chemicals are kind of fungible, they're large volume with minimal variation from producer to producer. SOCMA specialty chemical members provide a service, and that's namely that cost-effective solution to what a customer's applications are. So specialty chemical companies stress making what the customer wants as opposed to not what the plant can make. So it's often small batches, specific performance demands, and that's trade-wise, that's kind of one of the reasons why shifting sourcing on a dime is often disproportionately burdensome. So that's SOCMA in a nutshell. My background, I grew up in KC, and then I went on to undergrad and law school in Missouri, where I got an emphasis in environmental law. And I'm actually going back there this weekend. The little brother's graduating from college.
Very nice.
In Missouri.
Congratulations. Very nice.
Thank you. Yep. I'll relay that to him. But yeah, so it'll be good to see family and all that. So then I took the bar in Colorado, and I started working in-house for a Hawk company. I don't know if you're familiar. They manufacture water quality testing instrumentation.
Okay.
And they also manufacture specialty chemicals that go into that instrumentation. So, and then provide those testing instruments to municipalities and a range of other industries. So that was my first experience with the EHS, and while I was there, I actually sat across from a customs broker too. So that was very useful in what I'm doing now, trade with SOCMA. So then I moved to D.C., and I was fortunate to be put in touch with SOCMA, where I inherited this International Trade Committee and have been at SOCMA in D.C. going on 2 years now.
Very nice. Very nice.
And then, Ben, I'd be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to one of the reasons why our committee is so active on these trade policy environments, and that's our committee chairman, Jim DeLisi, who is, I don't know if you're familiar with ITAC 3. It's the Industry Trade Advisory Council on Chemicals, Pharmaceuticals, and Health Science Products. And they basically they work with the Department of Commerce and USTR to formulate U.S. trade policy for chemicals. And so our trade committee chairman is also chairman of that committee. So just an invaluable resource, and just very lucky to have access to Jim's wealth of knowledge in the chemicals trade space.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know just being on the TCC side, we had a guy for a while working very closely with you guys, and it's been an invaluable resource as these tariff announcements keep coming and going over the last probably 18 months now. So I know a lot of the content you guys are putting out and things you guys are staying on top of from a business side is incredibly valuable.
Yeah, glad to hear it. Yep, keeping busy. Glad to hear you find it valuable.
Yeah, sure thing. And jumping right into the main topic we're talking about here with the global tariff update, global trade update. It's almost funny in a way, maybe a disappointing way, but in a way where we've had this podcast scheduled now for 4 or 5 weeks. It's now mid-May, and I guess at that time we we're kind of looking for an update, and now obviously the last week to 2 weeks, stuff has kind of hit the fan a little bit. So certainly good timing, I think, to have this discussion and talk about what's going on. And I guess just, kind of jumping right into it to kind of keep it a little bit more specific. I know the first topic we had listed was the U.S. and European Union Airbus dispute and tariffs. You want to run through that a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. So the U.S. and EU have proposed new tariffs, and that's following a recent World Trade Organization finding that the EU basically breached its WTO obligations by subsidizing Airbus. So and the EU also proposed tariffs on U.S. origin chemicals, but EU tariffs would be implemented May 2020 at the earliest. So the U.S. list, which at this stage is the more legitimate list, more time-sensitive list, that largely excludes chemicals. But the EU list, and it's not a retaliatory list, in the sense of the China type stuff, because the U.S. may have subsidized Boeing. We don't really know yet. But the EU list has proposed tariffs on $3 billion worth of U.S. Origin chemical tariff lines. So that's a big deal for some of our members in the agro, pharma, and pigment space. And so comments to the EU are due by May 31st, end of the month. And those need to be made by companies with an EU presence. So we're just kind of facilitating members with an EU footprint to go through that process and communicate those burdens. But the hearings for the U.S. are actually this week, and the deadline to submit comments to the U.S. is May 28th. So, and I guess I can go into the background a little bit. So April 9, U.S. publishes a 7-page list of EU products, and this is to counteract that $11 billion of harm allegedly caused by EU subsidies to Airbus. So again, chemicals only make up about 3% of that 11 billion total of the imports listed, and that's various like resinoids and essential oils. Nothing too major there. Maybe more of a big deal for chemical distributors than manufacturers. But so then the EU responds with that proposed list on, I think it was roughly 20 billion worth of U.S. imports, and again 3 billion worth of U.S. chemicals captured. So in this proposed list comes in anticipation of a WTO ruling that the U.S. improperly subsidized Boeing. So that decision hasn't been made yet. This is kind of a, something the EU has in their chamber just in case they get a favorable ruling there. But so our initial analysis showed that chemicals and plastics are about 15% of that, and impacts to pigments, agro, and pharmaceuticals. So, but the tariff rate is undecided because we're still waiting on the WTO decision, and it's still undecided whether the EU can tariff U.S. chemicals at all. So just waiting for that final arbiter's decision, kind of in accordance with WTO settlement proceedings, and I think a U.S. decision is expected this summer, and a EU decision in May 2020. So, and that decision is going to the decision whether or not to levy tariffs is going to come into play into these upcoming trade negotiations between the U.S. and EU. And I think a delegation of EU officials recently came to Washington to create an agenda ahead of negotiations. And the goal is to finalize a free trade agreement before the end of this European Commission, which is in office through October.
And that's and then those tariffs include products that are actually manufactured in the U.S.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, and if any listeners want access to these lists, they're all publicly accessible, but feel free to, my contact information will be on this, so feel free to follow up with me and I can provide those to you. So, but also, USTR and the Trump administration has been busy this morning. One of the three things that happened just this morning, actually late Thursday night, but so the Auto 232 executive order came out that the Trump administration is delaying for 6 months a decision whether to tariff European and Japanese autos while negotiations take place, basically. So that was some big news this morning, but it's kind of like the China Section 301 tariff situations where negotiations and an agreement may eventually moot the need to advocate for delistings and exclusions, but nevertheless, you still got to proactively comment and testify if you can and just kind of communicate these burdens to USTR and the foreign counterparts. So,
and I assume that would be considered a positive thing, the fact that those tariffs were delayed?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. I was in a meeting this morning, and that was kind of the main issue.
And I guess just to put it out there too, just so everyone knows. So today's May 17th. I always find when I listen to podcasts, you're trying to figure out, the timeline of when that stuff was. So today's Friday, May 17th. This episode should be live in the next couple of days. But just so people are wondering the timeliness of things, this is what we're basing it off of.
Absolutely. Very fluid situation. So, before you rely on this for, business or legal advice, maybe reach out to Ben and I so we can verify that things haven't changed. We're covering Brexit. It's a great example of.
Yeah, at this rate, this may need to be a daily podcast at this rate.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. That's kind of the situation with EU, US Airbus, and it's just one of these issues that we work through the SOCMA International Trade Committee. So, and
this will be something specifically regarding this situation that we'll start to hear more about kind of as the summer goes on, maybe after May, maybe June, July, something like that.
Yep, absolutely. Expect that first WTO decision on whether, how much the U.S. can tariff the EU this summer.
Sure,
yep.
Sure. Yeah, the next big topic we had on the list was the Miscellaneous Tariff Bill, which I know is something we've talked about on our own TCC podcast with some of our regulatory folks and regulatory conversations we've had in the past. But maybe kind of explain the Miscellaneous Tariff Bill, or MTB, kind of explain what it is and some of the recent updates on that.
Yep. So, like you said, Ben, MTB stands for Miscellaneous Tariff Bill. And MTB is essentially a measure that if it's enacted by Congress, it creates temporary provisions in Harmonized Tariff Schedule, Chapter 99, and suspends or reduces those most favored nation duties on, but it's specific classes of imported products. So, and any U.S. importer can take advantage of the suspension. It's not just the petitioning company or individual, but it's a big deal for the specialty chemicals industry. For example, in the last MTB cycle, the one that's currently in effect, chemicals made up over 1,000 of the roughly 1,700 petitions that were vetted and cleared for relief by the U.S. International Trade Commission. So that current cycle, chemicals make up about 56% of the total savings from MTB, and that's just over $500 million. So again, it's a big deal for the industry. Quite often these the sources of the products covered by MTB, they also offer similar finished products into the market. And so SOCMA members are forced to compete with their intermediate suppliers in the domestic market as well as export markets. And that's especially the case with NAFTA, where neither it nor the NAFTA 2.0 USMCA allows for duty drawback. So any level of tariff collected in such an instance just from the onset places U.S.-based production at a severe disadvantage. Another piece to it is the existing process caps the maximum level of savings for an individual product at $500,000 per year, something we are looking into modifying. But it's really a bipartisan issue, meaning as long as U.S. industry isn't supplanting or replacing domestic inputs, like why should they have to pay tariffs on inputs that they need for the production of U.S. goods and staying competitive? So it's really a no-brainer, and it finally passed under unanimous consent, signed by President Trump in 2018, and that's that second cycle, which is in effect, which you basically just need to reference the HTS 9900 number on import declarations.
And that $500,000 number, can you explain that a little bit, what that means?
Yeah, so it's just a maximum level of savings for an individual product. So basically, savings for each importer trying to take advantage of this is capped.
So that would be $500,000 of otherwise duty that would be paid.
Yep, exactly.
Got it.
And so, I'll touch on that again in just a minute here.
Okay.
Because it is an interesting piece of it and something we're kind of wrestling with. But so MTBs are authorized under the American Manufacturing Competitiveness Act of 2016. And so the AMCA actually only authorizes 3 cycles of relief, and the third and final cycle begins this October. So at SOCMA, what we're doing is kind of launching this campaign to assist members with filing MTB petitions with the U.S. International Trade Committee's portal. And it's actually, we hear all this stuff going on right now with China and trying to get exclusions from List 1 and 2 and get exclusions from 232 auto tariffs, and just the lack of transparency and the lack of visibility into their criteria for assessing these. But actually, the U.S. ITC process, it's very transparent, and it's a very thorough vetting process. And given the degree of that members use this legislation, it's really grateful to the ITC for that. So,
sure.
Again, that begins in October of 2019, and then it kind of goes through these. It's like a public comment process where companies that say they want to produce it domestically, they can file adverse comments and say, hey, don't give tariff relief. That's going to incentivize companies sourcing it from foreign as opposed to domestic, and we want to make this. So that's kind of what makes it all work.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. Almost the opposite side of that, where in terms of trying to stir new U.S. production, a company can adversely try to not get things to be approved, so that obviously make it a better playing field for them. That's one point of view I hadn't thought about before.
Yeah, and the U.S. ITC is really good about notifying the original submitter of the petition that, hey, this company says they can make it. Putting in contact with them.
Yep.
So,
yep.
And that's not always the case with other processes. So, and then, Commerce gets it at a certain point. They go through various. They make sure it's not supplanting domestic production, and then so we're looking at a congressional vote, probably fall, winter 2020, and this is for duty relief for 2021, 22, and 23. So that's that third batch under the AMCA. So something really interesting that SOCMA is doing now, as of a couple months ago. So we're engaging the U.S. ITC and Congress, kind of planting seeds, trying to enable permanent duty suspensions and reductions, because it's going to be over within come 2023. So, and we are advocating for this by basically what would happen is Congress would modify the name of the intermediate chemicals for dyes appendix to the duty-free chemicals appendix, the duty-free chemicals appendix. So, and that's to the U.S. Harmonized Tariff Schedule. So, and again, I just got to give credit here to Jim DeLisi, who again is our trade chairman. This is really his brainchild. But anywho, so the key to permanent relief is targeting products that the U.S. economy needs to prosper, but at the same time, you can't dilute USTR's leverage in the international forum. So since most of these 6- and 8-digit tariff lines are basket categories, permanent suspensions can't be made through the tariff schedules themselves, because you would adversely affect kind of too many other U.S. interests that are contained in those tariff lines. So basically, we submitted legislative language to enable permanent reductions and suspensions for appropriate products through that vehicle that already exists, that intermediate chemicals for dyes appendix. So,
sure.
A little background.
Two good criteria.
Go ahead,
two good criteria there too, with the not something that the U.S. needs to prosper, as well as something that's not going to adversely affect trade. Those are two kind of good, I guess, generic ways of explaining it with what the end goals are for these tariffs.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be as heavy as a lift because the mechanism that dies appendix already exists. You would just need Congress to change the name of it.
Got it.
And I mean, chemicals make up half of MTB petitions, so just right there, the goal of permanent duty suspensions is in sight. So,
and I assume this may be the case for each of the topics we're going to talk about, but any further explanation or info can be found by reaching out to you, or I guess visiting the SOCMA website and seeing what resources are available there.
Absolutely. Yep.
And of course, anybody listening, scroll down wherever you're streaming this on. We'll have Matt's contact info right there, email and phone number, to reach out and get some more info.
Absolutely. Yep. So a little background, just because not everyone knows what a appendix is to the U.S. tariff schedule. So when the Uruguay round trade agreement was finalized, President Clinton actually sent a message to Congress in 1994, and it contained details of the agreement, and included in that were two new major annexes to the U.S. tariff schedules. So one was the pharmaceutical appendix, and the other is this dyes intermediate appendix. And this pharma appendix, for example, has been vital for the health of the pharmaceutical industry, and also includes an international process to update the appendix every 3 years. So, by changing the name to the duty-free chemicals appendix, and then, like we discussed, you got to allow for those regular updates that satisfies the letter and spirit of the AMCA's vetting process. The goal of permanent duty suspensions is realistic. So, like competitors in the EU, for example, have had a program in place like this for decades. And so this would really put U.S. producers on a level playing field.
Yeah, it sounds like a great conversation that's happening, and hopefully we see something that moves forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, we testified, commented on this to the U.S. ITC, and just the other week we had our in-person trade meeting, and we're having another fly-in in September. But we ran this legislative language by the House Ways and Means Committee because, again, it would still have to go through Congress, but the mechanism already exists. So much lighter lift, and we're also building a coalition with other trade groups in D.C. and just going to get more active as it becomes more relevant ahead of the current batch's expiration.
Sure. Yeah, it sounds like a lot of things happening, maybe more in the background than up front, but a lot of good conversations and things happening with you guys and other trade groups around DC, and just looking to make the industry the best that it can be.
Yeah, with all this trade uncertainty, there's always little wrinkles where we can try and get in and improve conditions for members. So this is
Sure.
a good example of one.
Yeah, the next big topic we had is Brexit. A lot of big topics, a lot kind of going on with each of these topics, obviously, and we're trying to give the best overview we can, kind of update on what's happening. But what's the latest with the Brexit situation?
Latest with the Brexit. So as you know, extended to Halloween, October 31st, 2019. And then the EU review in June 2019. That's kind of a deadline in itself. But, no fundamental changes, really. Theresa May still needs a broader coalition of interests in the House of Commons to pass the withdrawal agreement within the prescribed time. So, it's just been extended again, that's all. So I think the ECA portal is going to remain open to transfer registrations, and that's really, the main chemical concern. So transfer those registrations to non-UK ORs, only representatives.
Yeah, that was going to be my next kind of follow-up question, is how that would or would not affect people doing business with that region, as well as people that are buying products that come out of that region. Is there major implications with the uncertainty, as well as if it goes one way or the other?
Absolutely. It was just 2 or 3 weeks ago we heard that a customs union was in the works, but apparently that's not the case anymore, and talks have kind of broken down. But yeah, ECA, it recommends companies prepare for UK withdrawal without that transition period. So it's kind of the hope for the best, plan for the worst type scenario. But you just use ECA's IT tools before the Brexit date, basically. So if an only representative isn't appointed, the EU 27 importers are going to have to submit their own registration. So, and I think I saw yesterday that if Theresa May loses her, she doesn't get the withdrawal agreement through the House of Commons again for the fourth time, she's going to resign, actually. She can't formally be challenged until December, but I think she said that she's going to resign if it doesn't get through a fourth time. So
that's the next. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's going to be early June, if that was going to be your question.
Got it. So the next big deadline is that October 31st date. There's not really much to see or wait for before that.
Yep, that's Brexit date. But the EU review in June 2019. So there's this whole thing of passing the withdrawal agreement before European parliamentary elections. So if the withdrawal is not passed by then, Britain must take part in these elections. So it's like you said, its EU membership is due to end on October 31st, with or without a deal. But I think if the UK doesn't take part in the elections and hasn't ratified an exit deal, Britain might leave without an agreement on June 1st, something like that.
Got it. So we're looking more like June. Next couple of weeks, we should see some big news coming out of there.
Exactly. June's going to be a big ticket month for that.
Got it.
And I'm not steeped on this. I try and keep up.
Sure.
But it's it seems like might be a new prime minister. I don't know if that solves things, but kind of where we more fit in is we commented on the U.S. negotiating objectives with the UK. If and when the UK successfully leaves the EU and is able to negotiate a trade agreement with the U.S. during that transition period.
Got it.
So I can briefly touch on our 5 main takeaways from those comments. So obviously eliminate tariffs on specialty chemical products. So those are in Harmonized Tariff Schedule chapters 28 through 39. A lot of this specialty chemicals trade is intercompany. And so the benefits of tariff elimination would just be quickly felt soon after the agreement's entry into force. So our second one was incorporating USMCA, that's that US-Mexico-Canada agreement, style chemical rules of origin, with a couple exceptions. But so those updates drastically improve conditions for the vast majority of our sectors and really should be utilized in future free trade agreements, including any US-UK. The exceptions would be, and this is fairly technical, but just deleting reference to value content tests for the specialty chemical sector, and also exceptions language in 3206 to 3212. But third one, eliminate technical barriers to trade. Easier said than done.
Yep.
Protection of IP, including trade secrets. REACH, mandates certain test data be shared. Consequently, the agreement should promote transparency and safeguard data in a manner that allows members to best innovate, knowing their investments are protected, type thing. And then promoting regulatory cooperation. So just having direct dialogue with ECA in order to ensure compliance with REACH would really benefit the industry. So, regionally speaking, Western Europe is the U.S. chemical industry's largest source of chemical imports. So tremendous opportunities to create these efficiencies and just kind of build upon the regional trading relationships. So,
and it sounds like it's a lot of stuff that's relatively, needs to go without saying, or things that should be kind of common sense, but it's just a matter of actually, making them happen and, putting pen to paper.
Yep. So I don't know if a new prime minister is going to solve the crisis. We'll see what happens with this fourth try week of June 3rd, but I think it's more of a formality, and I've heard talks have broken down in the last couple of days. So
got it. So something to keep an eye on for the next few weeks, and go from there.
We'll see what happens. Yep.
Sure thing. Next big topic we have on the list, obviously, I think goes without saying, most people should be familiar with this, at least by now, is the situation between the U.S. and China on trade. We have a couple representatives over at the APIC, the chemical conference in Asia, in Taipei this week. So we're starting to hear some feedback from them and comments on them kind of from an Asian perspective. But what's the latest on China? I know that's a fun question to ask. There's a lot that goes into it.
It's a loaded question, Ben.
Yes. So what's the latest within the last couple days or weeks here?
A lot of different pieces here. So I saw this morning there are now imposed or threatened tariffs on about 91% of all goods from China. So now the 3 big ticket items for SOCMA. Number one, List 3, increase rates in the forthcoming process for product exclusion requests. Number 2 is the U.S. List 4, and number 3 is China retaliation. And that number 2, U.S. List 4, that was just published this morning, actually. So,
and just to make sure we're hearing it right, so the 91% is products coming from China or from the U.S.?
From China.
From China. So this was announced by the U.S.
Yep, Chinese origin chemicals.
Got it.
Yep. Which there are imposed or proposed tariffs on essentially all Chinese origin chemicals at this point, as of this morning. So I'll try and set the stage a little bit leading up to the current escalation, and then kind of dig a little deeper into potential impacts to various specialty chemical sectors, and then what companies can do to mitigate exposure to these Section 301 tariffs and retaliation.
Sure.
Does that sound good?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. So our first main argument to USTR was that delisting these chemicals is going to hinder China's Made in China 2025 policy. So that's the administration's goal in all this. So for years, China has actually been incentivizing manufacturers to move up the value chain. For example, many products in the past have had export subsidies, but kind of these lower products on the value chain lost these subsidies years ago. So roughly half of the overall goods imported from China are inputs. Nearly every line item in HTS chapters 28 and 29, organics and inorganics, by definition, is an input that manufacturers import and then use to manufacture new chemicals. So putting tariffs onto raw materials or intermediates coming into the U.S., the administration is just aiding the Chinese plan for 2025. So, and I mean, the Chinese may be happy to see this low-end manufacturing leave China, but I'm sure they'd rather do it on their own way and not at President Trump's pace. So, regarding chemicals, a total of 1,517 chemical and plastic imports from China, valued at $15 billion, have now been targeted by 3 rounds of U.S. tariffs. And that's, I think I looked this morning, there's maybe like 150 other tariff lines on List 4. So lots of, the U.S. List 1, it originally had some pigment and pharmaceutical intermediates on it. Those were delisted. We filed comments and testified there on behalf of members. U.S. List 2, lots of plastics on there, but the SOCMA members really cared about List 3 almost exclusively, and the rate on that just went to 25% last Friday, May 10th.
Yep. Yeah, no, we put an email out about that and had made sure everyone was aware of that as best as possible when that kind of announcement came through. Yeah,
very big deal. So since nearly all Chinese origin chemicals were on that. So what we did, basically, we solicited members' imports and justifications for delisting, because you can ask USTR to delist these for XYZ reasons. And we also testified. And so we ended up with nearly 50 pages of comments to USTR, asking that basically that chemical chapters be delisted. And in the event that those can't be delisted, we had over 40 pages of specific chemical subheadings that members import along with justifications for delisting. So, I mean, it really goes to show how big a deal it was for the industry and how interdependent the supply chains are, as you know. But, and also the U.S. Chamber actually came out with a study that found tariffs impact chemical manufacturers third most behind ag and autos and auto parts.
Wow.
So kind of one of these things, you know, you hear about ag and autos all the time, but we're really trying to get, be a voice for the industry regarding just how burdensome this can be. So
yeah, it's great. It's great having that mechanism there, and obviously good to make people aware as best as possible that exists. To, you know, hopefully as you're submitting these lists and these products and these notes from all these companies, it's, you know, making a difference and at least being weighed as a factor when you know, the powers that be are discussing these and discussing the impact that it might make.
Absolutely, and I can provide those you know, comments to you, Ben, and we can put them in the resources section. So, and then after this comment period on List 3, when it was finalized in September of 2018, we were kind of happy to see, all things considered, that chemicals actually made up nearly half of all delisted tariff lines, which it just really illustrates a lack of sourcing alternatives for the industry. Because, as you know, getting into specialty chemicals, again, they're just made for particular purity, quality, performance demands for a bunch of different downstream sectors. So given these rigid quality standards, alternative sources are just extremely finite. And for most industry sectors, tariffs mean shifting sourcing, which results in a rise for the price of imports. But for chemicals, it's just not possible all the time. So, chemical manufacturing requires very costly, specialized infrastructure and expertise. There's regulatory burdens, need for significant capital investment, and just the speed or lack thereof by EPA and permit and pollution system approvals for new sources of these ingredients. It just makes for a slow process, and often it's just a non-starter. So
yeah, I was gonna say that's a big piece of it too, is the approval of actual material. Price is obviously a big deal. Supply chain availability is a big deal, but especially if companies have been using a certain product that's produced in China for a long time, especially in some industries like pharma and automotive, where it can take 2-3 years to approve a new product, there's not going to be much other option except for to pretty much eat the tariff while they can try to formulate new ideas for supply and things like that. So that approval process is certainly a big part of that on the chemical manufacturer side, and something to certainly keep an eye on, and kind of goes to show the importance of having multiple approved sources of supply as best you can.
Absolutely. Yep. And we were actually quoted in a CNN article the other day, because President Trump, he wants to repatriate all this manufacturing, but chemicals is just a great example of where it's just not always possible.
Yep.
So we did sector specific dives on agrochemical, active ingredients, performance chemicals, active pharmaceutical ingredients, and in comments and testimony just kind of really stress particular pain points this creates for batch chemistry. So all this to say, we support the administration's aim to reach zero tariffs, right? But it's just imposing this kind of taxation, especially with a List 3 increase, and it's exacerbated by retaliatory tariffs. It's just not the proper method to achieve that goal, and really hurts small and medium-sized companies in the meantime.
And for, I guess, people that are anywhere from loosely familiar with these tariff situations all the way up to, if companies have experts on the situation, what are some of the best resources to keep an eye on the most up-to-date tariff, situation updates, actual, what the tariffs are on certain products, things like that? What are some of the best resources that you can recommend to companies like, even like TCC and other distribution companies and domestic manufacturers? What are some of the best resources you guys are using and recommending?
Yep. So you can obviously find, various law firms, and we publish press statements and things on our website. But really, you just got to dig into the listed products in the Federal Register notice. So it really helps to sign up for the pre-publications of those notices through the Register, and just dig into those, and kind of just depending on the sector that you're in. Looking at the various chapters, whether 28 through 38, just kind of getting into yourself. But, leaning on trade groups like SOCMA is a good way to do it.
Yeah, and I guess this will probably be the case with every, topic we're talking about, but, I assume people can reach out to you and you can kind of put them in the right direction for some, more downstream kind of sector-specific info.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can actually get into, I'll briefly touch on it in a bit, but so the main thing on the List 3 rate increase was the word "and" in the annex language. And Ben, you might have heard of this, but it basically meant that goods currently on the water, and this was back like a week and a half ago, won't be subject to that tariff increase since they were exported prior to May 10th. And this decision to exempt goods in transit, it's kind of rarely offered by U.S. administrations. And it lent industry this very short window of reprieve to adjust supply chains, kind of while negotiations continue. But so we try to notify members as soon as possible, and notify them to consider just accelerating clearing processes or remove from bond materials needed in the short term, kind of just on an urgent basis. So
Yeah, that was a big piece to the. We sent an article and we sent an email out and put a newsletter up on our website saying, hey, China tariffs are 25%, and then kind of this big, but if you already have stuff on the water, you're not going to be subject to that. Kind of I guess a sign of good faith is the best way I guess to describe it, that they included that language in there.
Yeah, that's why getting the pre-publication early is so important. I'm sure most of the stuff was on the ships already, but China, for example, kind of did the same thing, but with effective June 1st. And we also said, it's not unusual for containers from China to be transshipped through ports in Singapore or the Middle East or wherever. So just kind of urge members to keep that original bill of lading, make sure that stays with the shipment until it arrives in the U.S., just to take advantage of this brief opportunity.
Yep, certainly. And what's your guys' outlook on the China situation? Obviously, nobody can predict the future. We've been having conversations for probably the last 6 months about our personal outlook on it. We don't know any better than necessarily any other company does, but our kind of position has been that it's something that's probably going to be there for a little while. I don't know if we necessarily expected it to go to 25%, but we were pretty confident that the 10% would kind of hang around while both China and the U.S. are trying to make a deal, and we're confident that China wasn't just going to take a deal, even if it was a bad deal. They're kind of bunkering down and are prepared to kind of wait it out. But what are you guys seeing? What's kind of your loose position on what you see coming, through 2019 and maybe getting into 2020?
So we have late June, President Xi and Trump are meeting at the G20 summit in Japan. So I think that's the next big date. It's going to be tough. Like you said, both sides are digging in. I mean, curbing China's state capitalism, subsidizing state-owned enterprises, IP theft, that's kind of why state capitalism works. So it's going to be hard, and as things escalate and kind of get more protracted, and it's going to be tough for each side to give way without looking weak. A few weeks ago, I was in the camp of anticipating a deal like kind of markets were, but it seems like, I think Treasury Secretary Mnuchin said the other day that U.S. negotiators are going to go to Beijing soon, but then Beijing just yesterday kind of pushed back and was like, well, we don't really want to operate with these threats looming, similar to what they've done in the past. So
yep.
I think the base case still isn't for an all-out trade war, but aside what already is, but I think it's certainly a tail risk that markets are going to start pricing in.
So that end of June date, probably the next big date to keep an eye on regarding the U.S.-China situation, and see what comes out of those talks, and maybe have a better idea of what the kind of mood is for the rest of 2019 after that.
Yep, and that kind of brings me to List 4, because these List 4 dates to testify and comment kind of coincide with that expected meeting. So, like, President Trump hasn't decided yet whether or not to impose List 4, but he's going to have it at the ready if negotiations fail or stall leading up to or in that G20 meeting.
Yep, certainly makes sense.
Yep. So, do you want me to get into List 4 briefly? Or?
Sure. Yeah, maybe give a brief overview of it, of what we kind of know about it so far, and your guys' outlook on that list.
Yep. Oh, and actually, Ben, I'll just note that USTR is creating a exclusion request process for List 3.
Okay.
That's expected in late May. So a delisting happens during the comment period, but a exclusion request happens after that list has been finalized, and you get a refund on it.
Sure.
So it really is a huge deal for the industry that USTR is going to establish this list. So we're basically just going to help members file those, provide guidance on what works, how many attachments to include. And you really need specific numbers like the total cost of producing the final products that the Chinese imports account for, your gross sales in 2017. So it's a lot of company-specific info, but if the exclusion is granted, it's product-specific, not company-specific. So we make sure anytime exclusions are granted, we blast out a list of all those to membership to take advantage of. So List 4, published this morning, captures the rest of Chinese origin chemicals except certain pharmaceuticals and rare earths that have been deemed important to safety and security. So our initial analysis shows that potential big impacts to high volume agrochemicals. And also, interestingly, certain pigment intermediates that were previously delisted from List 1 are back on List 4. So right now we're just doing the same thing we did on List 3, soliciting members' imports and justifications, CAS numbers, alternate sources, shelf life of input, all these little justifications that go to whether or not your burden is disproportionate. So June 10, deadline to request to testify, and June 17 is the deadline for comments to USTR. So
got it.
That's that. That's the rest of the Chinese imports. Sorry, Ben, were you going to say something?
Yeah, so it's certainly a good overview on the whole situation. I know, like you said before, and it's kind of the best way to say it is it's such a fluid situation. You go to bed one night, you wake up the next night, and there's a whole new, list or something coming down the pipeline that we're starting to hear rumors about. So it has been probably pretty unique, I would assume, based on past, kind of trade relations with things happening so quickly and trying to keep, ahead of all the different situations that are going on.
Mm-hmm. And also just last point is the Chinese retaliation. So after the List 3 rate increase, China on Monday retaliated by increasing rates on their $60 billion worth of U.S. products. And those 4 lists are currently tariffed at 5% and 10%. But so those are going to ratchet up. And each 4 of these lists contain chemicals. So these are U.S. origin chemicals being shipped to China. 25% tariff list on just over 2,000 items that has 344 chemicals, 20% tariff on 1,000 items, 184 of those are chemicals, 10% tariff on another 1,000, 190 chemicals, 5% tariff is going to remain on, 600 items and about 270 chemicals. So, I mean, it's just, you could be hit double, if you get your imports from China, formulate, ship it back to China. It's just a nightmare depending on the sector that you're in.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting thing to keep an eye on. I know it doesn't necessarily affect our business personally, but I'm sure there are people that's a piece of their business, and it's something certainly a big number to keep an eye on.
Yeah. So like the U.S., it doesn't apply to products in transit. We kind of got that exception, but applies to goods leaving U.S. shores starting June 1st. And then China also did establish an exclusion request process. So if you have companies in China, basically, if it's not just wholly owned Chinese firms, but also wholly foreign-owned enterprises, joint ventures registered in China. This process is kind of similar to the U.S. process for List 1 and 2 in terms of rationales for granting exclusions and duration and refund eligibility, things like that. But it's just, through Chinese HTS codes.
Yep.
There's a big difference. So you can file an exclusion request from September 2nd to October 18th.
Okay, got it.
Yep.
So maybe we'll include all those deadlines and important dates down in the show notes as well if you want to scroll down, check those out. But certainly a good overview on China. I know things have been changing quickly, and appreciate the good overview. And we'll certainly see where things shake out over the next couple months.
Absolutely.
Next big topic we had listed was the India situation. You'll give a quick overview on that.
Sure. So India. GSP, Generalized System of Preferences, India and Turkey. So it's a good transition because, India is often the only other source of certain intermediates, but Indian sources may have quality issues or may not have sufficient quantities. But in any event, it's a critical source of inputs for the industry. And the Trump administration, any day now, can remove India's preferential status from the Generalized System of Preferences. So what is GSP? It basically allows developing countries to export thousands of goods to the U.S. without paying duties. So chemicals, it's usually the rate is usually 3 to 6.5%. So if a country in chemical is GSP eligible, that rate is waived for Indian exporters and U.S. importers. So there's about 5,000 tariff items that are eligible. But the Trump administration really has made a point of being more proactive in determining whether countries are kind of obeying the criteria for participating in this decades-old program. So we'll just start with Turkey. The Trump administration this morning formally kicked Turkey out of GSP program with a proclamation. It's effective today too.
So that goes into effect today. That's actually in effect today.
Effective today. Yep.
Got it.
Yep. So the president announced in March that he was terminating benefits for Turkey because it's just basically outgrown the program, developing country-wise. But India, on the other hand, that's more of a market access issue as opposed to developing country. But Trump has yet to formally terminate India's participation in GSP. So for chemicals, a lot of raw materials are just not domestically available, therefore sourced from India. For example, I think roughly half of tariff lines in HTS Chapter 29 organic chemicals come GSP duty-free from India. So those are going to potentially revert to normal tariff status. So at SOCMA, we try and do sector-specific analysis. So take pharma, for example. If this happened to India, I think the impacts are pretty minimal considering HTS Chapter 30 is GSP duty-free. So no impact for any prepared pharmaceuticals. Most of the APIs in Chapter 29 are on that pharma 0 for 0 list, so no impact. But there may be some newer products where they aren't on the list, and also it would impact pure APAP and aspirin, which are currently GSP from India since they are not part of that pharma appendix. So sort of technical stuff, but once you break it down, it's understandable. So.
And do you think that'll be something that'll hang around for a while too, or is that something Trump's kind of doing in advance of any meetings coming up, or what do you see the outlook on that?
It's interesting. I think Secretary Ross visited India May 6th through 8th with the Commerce Department and for the Trade Winds Business Forum. So I think we expected to hear something soon if Ross kind of presented a trade package there. But so since Trump notified Congress back in March, he can issue a proclamation terminating India's status any day now. But the thing is, it's kind of like Turkey. It's unclear whether the proclamation is going to be effective immediately. So it could be formulated on X day with a stipulation that it takes effect X days hence. But as we saw this morning with Turkey, I think the normal course of business is that it comes fairly immediately thereafter. So. And also, we've heard that it's kind of flexible in terms of the president's authority to slice and dice, meaning it's not a all or nothing deal. And so there's a chance, albeit small, that chemicals are excluded from removal. So it's just lots of uncertainty here, and it's just an important piece that we're stressing to USTR, who we met with the other week. India did ask for a 90-day postponement, because they're dealing with their 34-day process of electing parliament. And I don't think there's any word yet whether the Trump administration is going to, regarding that request. But we'll see what happens in June when the new Indian government is in place. And right now we just kind of hope that the administration is kind of laying groundwork for re-engagement in the middle of the year.
Sure. So. Yeah, I know each of the three regions are obviously important, especially for U.S.-based companies. Even if maybe companies aren't directly purchasing from those regions, they're aware of what that pricing looks like, and may use it as a competitive situation or trying to get lower prices from other regions or even domestic manufacturers. So certainly an important thing to keep an eye on is could change prices by 3 or 6%, which depending on the product in the industry could be a major swing.
Absolutely. Yep.
So certainly something to keep an eye on. Obviously, one of those things that are kind of too new to really know all the ins and outs of, but something I'm sure we'll hear more about in the coming weeks and see what the situation is on that.
Yes, we'll see come June.
Yeah, and so the final big bullet point we have on our list is the USMCA, or the NAFTA 2.0, as I think you referred to it earlier. Something we've talked about in the past on our own podcast and some of our view episodes. We have Javier Fernandez, who manages Latin America for us. Obviously keeps an eye on that closely with business coming in and out of the States. But what's the latest on the USMCA?
Latest on USMCA. So, as you probably know, President Trump called it his biggest legislative agenda item of the year. So big deal for all trade groups in D.C. getting this across the finish line. And just, because there are subtle improvements for most industries. I think the USITC report reported, marginal benefits But I can start with why it's an improvement from NAFTA for our industry, at least from the specialty chemical manufacturing perspective.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So the modernized chemical rules of origin. So the simplicity of the new process rules are a major improvement for the industry. Just proving that originating content is simplified. For example, the chemical reaction rule, it's a process which results in a molecule with a new structure that wasn't in NAFTA 1.0. So also the lack of need to determine regional value content to confer origin is a big plus. So rules of origin, I'm sure everyone's familiar, but just in case, it's just rules that require a product to include a certain percentage of originating content. So again, the new chemical reaction rule, it's that process which includes a biochemical reaction that results in a molecule with a new structure, basically. And it breaks those intramolecular bonds and it forms new intramolecular bonds. It basically alters the spatial arrangement of atoms in a molecule. So that wasn't an option before. So that's great news for U.S. industry. There's also a chemical sector annex that lists specific opportunities for enhanced cost efficiencies. For example, risk assessment cooperation, promoting GHS alignment, the development of chemical inventory. So, I mean, we really do, as an industry, have skin in the game here. And then also adequate protection of CBI, just vital to the industry. And USMCA offers the gold standard, really, when it comes to secure data flows and data storage provisions in a trade deal. So, right. We also advocate for the eliminate the prohibition on the use of duty drawback. Similar to provisions found in free trade agreements executed after NAFTA, but USTR Lighthizer disfavored that. So it would have allowed specialty chemical manufacturers to receive refunds on duties paid on imported chemical inputs.
And what are the dates for the USMCA? Just so everyone's familiar, is it fully enacted? Is it still being reviewed? What's the situation on that?
Right. So there's this thing called a Trade Promotion Authority, which kind of sets out a timeline of things that need to happen. So according to that TPA timeline, the Trump administration still needs to submit to Congress the final text of the deal and a statement of administrative action. So both those texts got to be sent 30 days before the implementing legislation of USMCA can be submitted to Congress. So originally, the idea was, May, June 2019, indefinitely before August recess. But and you might see Chairman Grassley or whomever on the Hill saying, look, if this doesn't happen in 2019, it's not going to happen in 2020 in an election year. So we really need to get going here. Yep. So the agreement still has to get through the ratification process in Canada and Mexico, but the prospect of resistance in the U.S. is really the big question mark. And I can briefly touch on what House Democrats want to see, if you'd like.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And just free trade agreements in general require majority support in the House and Senate. Senate won't be an issue, but House Democrats are concerned with Mexican labor reform implementation, environmental protections, and biologics. So increased data exclusivity that Democrats say it would just reduce generic drugs and lead to higher drug prices. But lots of conflicting feelings on that. So regarding labor in Mexico, Ms. Pelosi and other Democrats, they voted for NAFTA in 1993, but they thought its labor provisions basically weren't effective. So now, even though the Mexican Senate has passed the necessary legislation the other week, which was a really important step to getting USMCA across the finish line, the Democrats just want to see Mexico fully implement this. There's an annex in the deal that just requires the country to let workers freely organize. So they just want that proper enforcement.
Got it.
Another piece of it is the steel and aluminum tariffs holding up ratification. I think we are getting closer to resolving those tariffs. Last year, a Dow executive said that steel accounted for roughly 20% of the cost of, a $6 billion petrochemical project in the Gulf Coast. So certainly for commodity manufacturers, it's a big deal.
And I guess based on what you're seeing with all the different situations with the steel tariffs, with the Mexican labor issues, is SOCMA's position or is your position that you think something will get done in the next couple weeks or months to beat the August recess, or are we on track for that, or is it going to be a tight squeeze?
It's going to be a tight squeeze, Ben.
Yeah.
Very tight squeeze. And, we need to resolve China. That's kind of Lighthizer is being pulled in all directions now.
Right. Yeah, and I think one of the biggest takeaways I would say, from anyone that's listened to this whole podcast start to end, is there is a lot of different situations going on. Pretty much every region of the world has some type of trade issue or change or legislation going on, and there's a lot of different aspects going on globally, and it's hard to say which are more important than others. They all certainly play a role in each other, and obviously with their own that situation specifically for each of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm shocked at USTR's bandwidth and their ability to keep up so far. I think we just covered whatever was 5 or 6 different topics. Any one of these topics alone would be a massive deal, and now we got there's 6 of them going on at the same time. It's a pretty amazing kind of bandwidth of things going on throughout the world. Yeah, and I think Lighthizer is actually going to testify later this month, so I'm sure lawmakers are anxious to hear what the administration's plans are to address those labor, environment, drug price concerns, and that's later this month. So keep an eye out for that. And SOCMA in general, we're just working with coalitions on the Hill with various trade groups, and also urging members, call the offices of their lawmakers, particularly trade-focused freshmen, and show support for the deal and just really move the deal this year before 2020 elections.
Right, sure thing. Wrapping things up, any resources or things that stand out that you'd like to get across for anybody from other trade groups, other domestic manufacturers, chemical distribution companies, any groups of people, anything big that you would recommend as resources for people to be aware of and checking, maybe not daily but weekly or monthly to get really good info and up-to-date info on these big topics that are going on?
Politico Trade puts out good, it's not chemical focused, but
sure.
Looking for high-level trade issues, they do a morning email. And, I can't tell you how many member alerts we've put out in the last few weeks, So obviously trade groups, if you don't have adequate staff internally to deal with these issues, that's really what trade groups are meant for. So, it really helps when Ben and the chemical company have resources like this to get members in the know. So really appreciate your letting me on here, Ben. Yeah,
appreciate having you. A lot of good info and really strong update on a lot of the different situations that were going on. I'm sure most people listening are aware of at least a couple of them, but I'm sure there were probably some new trade deals and issues going on and things that people weren't aware of. So a great overview on kind of the full worldwide trade issues and situations. So appreciate you having you. What's the best way to get in touch with you, or maybe if someone's interested in learning more about SOCMA and getting involved with SOCMA, how does one do that?
Yeah, I think my email and phone number is going to be coupled with the podcast, so that works. Or feel free to check out our website, email our government relations team. Any other ways, we'll facilitate kind of any of the things, whether it's tariff lists or chemical annexes or appendixes to the U.S. tariff schedule. We'll facilitate all that. So
great.
Feel free to call or email.
Yeah. Again, thank you for the time. We appreciate you sitting down this morning. It was hopefully an insightful episode, and I'm looking forward to the feedback on it. And maybe plan on having you back in a couple months to give an update on all the different situations going on.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I'm sure things will, have changed. So that's a good idea.
Yeah. Thanks again, Matt. Look forward to having you. And just once again, obviously this podcast is available wherever you do stream your podcasts from. We're on the Apple Podcast Store. If you have an Android, we're on the Google Play Store. You can stream the audio right from YouTube. A lot of our episodes, especially the newer ones, have a video recording behind it. Obviously this one with Matt being down in the DC area, is just audio only, but you can stream it right on YouTube. We'll have it posted on all our social media, thechemco.com/podcast. So try to make it as readily available as possible. Obviously, please check out the SOCMA website as well and get in contact with Matt. Wherever you're streaming this podcast, just scroll on down. We'll have his email and phone number right there to make it easy for you. Matt, thank you once again, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks again, Ben.
Thanks, everyone.